The shuttle shook hard as it passed through the docking bay shields. Danny Lawson gripped the armrest and tried to keep his face calm. He was 19 years old, fresh out of the Terran Academy, and he was about to board an alien warship filled with creatures that could snap him in half without trying. The cultural exchange program had seemed like a good idea 6 months ago. Earth wanted all eyes. The Kovathi Empire controlled half the known galaxy. Someone had to be the first human to live among them, to learn their ways, to build a bridge between two very different species. Danny had volunteered because he believed in the mission. Now, as the shuttle doors hissed open and he smelled the strange metallic air of the Kovathi vessel, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The first thing he noticed was how big everything was. The corridors were 12 feet tall. The doorways were wide enough for 3 humans to walk through side by side. Everything was built for giants, and giants they were. The Kovathi standing at the docking bay entrance stood over 7 feet tall. His skin was gray and covered in small, hard scales that caught the light like dull armor. His eyes were amber, with vertical pupils that reminded Danny of a snake. His hands ended in claws that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. When he spoke, his voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "You are the Terran," the Kovathi said. It was not a question. Danny nodded. "Yes, sir." "Danny Lawson. I am here for the exchange program." The Kovathi stared at him for a long moment. His amber eyes moved up and down, taking in Danny's small frame, his soft skin, his flat teeth, his dull fingernails. Danny knew what he was thinking. Every Kovathi he had met so far had thought the same thing. Humans were weak. Humans were soft. Humans were prey. "I am Keth Oren," the warrior said. "I will take you to the commander." He turned and walked away without waiting to see if Danny followed. Danny grabbed his bag and hurried after him. His shorter legs, struggling to match the alien's long stride. The warship was called the Ironclad Fang. It was a massive vessel, home to over 2,000 Kovathi warriors. As Danny walked through its corridors, he felt eyes on him from every direction. Warriors stopped their conversations to stare. Some whispered to each other in their harsh, clicking language. A few laughed openly. Danny kept his eyes forward and his mouth shut. He had been warned about this. The Kovathi respected strength above all else. They had built their empire through combat, through hunting, through proving themselves in battle. A species like humanity, which had risen to power through technology and cooperation rather than physical might, was seen as lesser, soft, unworthy. Catherine led him through a maze of corridors, until they reached a large door marked with symbols Danny did not recognize. The door slid open, and they stepped into a command center filled with screens and control panels. At the center of it all stood the largest Kovathi Danny had seen yet. Commander Dralveth was a mountain of gray scales and hard muscle. Scars covered his arms and face, each one a story of battle and survival. His amber eyes were cold and calculating as they fixed on Danny. "So," the commander said, "this is the human." "Yes, Commander," Cathoran said. There was amusement in his voice. "This is what Earth sends us." A child. Dralveth walked slowly around Danny, studying him like a predator examining potential prey. Danny stood still and kept his breathing steady. He would not show fear. He would not give them the satisfaction. "You are small," Dralveth said. "You have no claws. No fangs. Your eyes are weak. Your ears are dull. Your skin is soft enough that a hatchling could tear it open." He stopped in front of Danny and leaned down until their faces were inches apart. "Tell me, little Terran, why should I allow you on my ship? What could you possibly offer us?" Danny met his gaze without flinching. "I am here to learn, Commander, and maybe to show you that strength comes in many forms." Silence filled the room. Then Dralveth let out a sound that might have been a laugh, It was harsh and short, like a bark. "Strength in many forms," he repeated. "We shall see, little one. We shall see." He straightened and turned away. "Cathoran, show him to his quarters. Make sure he understands the rules of this ship. I do not want him dying by accident before I have a chance to see what he is made of." Cathoran grabbed Danny's arm and pulled him toward the door. His grip was painfully tight, his claws pressing into Danny's skin hard enough to leave marks. Danny did not cry out. He did not pull away. He simply walked. The quarters they gave him were small, barely more than a closet with a bed. The bed itself was a hard metal slab with a thin mat on top. There was no window, no decoration, nothing that suggested comfort. It was a room built for warriors who did not care about such things. "This is where you will sleep," Cathoran said. "Meals are served in the main hall at dawn and dusk. Training begins at first light. You will attend, though I doubt you will last more than a day." He smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Try not to die too quickly, pray thing. It would be boring." He left, and the door slid shut behind him. Danny sat down on the hard bed and let out a long breath. His arm throbbed where Cathoran had grabbed him. His heart was pounding. But beneath the fear and the pain, there was something else. Something harder. He had known this would not be easy. He had known they would mock him, underestimate him, try to break him. But Danny Lawson had not survived 19 years on Earth by being weak. He had grown up in the outer colonies, where life was hard and resources were scarce. He had learned to hunt, to track, to survive with nothing but his wits and his will. The Kovathi thought humans were soft. They thought humans were prey. Danny smiled in the darkness of his tiny room. They had no idea what humans were capable of. They had no idea what he was capable of. But they would learn. One way or another, they would learn. He lay back on the hard bed and closed his eyes. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. Tomorrow, he would start showing them exactly what a Terran could do. And he would not stop until every warrior on this ship knew his name. 3 weeks passed on the ironclad Fang, and every day was harder than the last. Danny trained with the warriors at first light, struggling through exercises designed for bodies twice his size and 3 times his strength. He ran until his lungs burned. He lifted weights until his muscles screamed. He sparred with partners who threw him to the ground again and again, laughing each time he fell. But every time he fell, he got back up. The mockery never stopped. The warriors called him prey thing and soft skin. They tripped him in corridors. They spilled his food in the mess hall. Cathoran was the worst of all. He seemed to take personal pleasure in making Danny's life miserable, always finding new ways to humiliate the young human in front of others. Danny endured it all in silence. He did not complain. He did not fight back. He simply kept going day after day, showing up for training no matter how much his body hurt, no matter how tired he was. Commander Dralveth watched but said nothing. In Kovathi culture, respect was earned through action. If Danny wanted to be treated as an equal, he would have to prove himself. No one would protect him. No one would help him. He was on his own. Then the ship arrived at via single quotes KATH. The planet hung in the viewport like a green and brown jewel, beautiful and deadly. Larkath was what the Kovathi called a death world, a place where everything was designed to kill. The jungles were filled with predators. The air was thick with toxic spores, and the plants themselves were often poisonous. It was the most dangerous place in the Kovathi Empire. It was also sacred. Danny stood with the other warriors in the main hall as Commander Dralveth explained what was about to happen. Every year, young Kovathi warriors came to Varkoth to complete the Trial of the Flame, a coming-of-age ritual that had existed for thousands of years. Each participant would be dropped into the jungle alone with nothing but a knife. They would have 7 days to survive and return with the skull of a Vorn beast, the most dangerous predator on the planet. Danny had seen images of Vorn beasts in the ship's database. They were massive creatures, 12 feet long, covered in armored scales that could stop a blade. Their fangs dripped with venom that could kill in minutes. Their claws could tear through metal. They were fast, they were smart, and they were nearly impossible to kill. Only the strongest Korvathi warriors ever brought back a Vorn skull. Many did not return at all. When the commander finished speaking, he asked if there were any volunteers beyond the scheduled participants. It was a tradition, a way for ambitious warriors to prove themselves ahead of their time. The hall was silent. No one moved. Then Danny raised his hand. The silence turned to shock, then to laughter. Warriors all around the hall roared with amusement. Catharn doubled over, clutching his stomach, tears streaming from his amber eyes. Even Commander Dralveth looked surprised. "The human wants to die," Catharn said between gasps of laughter. "The prey thing thinks it can hunt a Vorn beast." Danny stood still, his hands still raised, his face calm. He waited until the laughter began to fade, then spoke in a clear, steady voice. "I volunteer for the trial of the flame." Commander Dralveth studied him for a long moment. The amusement faded from his face, replaced by something harder to read. Curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe just disbelief. "You understand what you are asking," the commander said. "The trial is not a game. Warriors die on Varkath. Strong warriors. Warriors with claws and fangs and scales. You have none of these things. You will not survive." "I understand," Danny said. "I still volunteer." The commander looked at him for another long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. By ancient law, any who wish to prove themselves may enter the trial. We cannot refuse you." He paused. "But know this, little Terran. We will not rescue you. We will not help you. If you die down there, your body will rot in the jungle, and no one will mourn you. Do you still wish to proceed?" Danny nodded. Yes. The laughter had stopped now. The warriors stared at Danny with expressions ranging from confusion to contempt to grudging interest. They still thought he was a fool. They still believed he would die. But there was something else in their eyes now, something that had not been there before. Doubt. As the crowd began to break up, Danny felt a presence beside him. He turned to find a massive Korvathi standing there, older than the others, his gray scales marked with countless scars. This was Thaxgrol, the ship's hunt master, the most decorated warrior aboard. Danny had seen him from a distance, but had never spoken to him. Thaxgrol said nothing for a long moment. He simply studied Danny with eyes that seemed to see everything. Why? He finally asked. His voice was deep and quiet, nothing like the boasting tones of the younger warriors. Danny met his gaze. "Because they think I am weak. Because they think humans are prey. Because the only way to change is to show them otherwise." Thaxgrol's expression did not change. "You may die trying." "Maybe," Danny said. "But at least I will die as something more than a joke to them." The huntmaster stared at him for another long moment. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Danny watched him go, then turned back to the viewport and the deadly green planet waiting below. Tomorrow, he would be down there alone, armed with nothing but a knife and his will to survive. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. He was afraid. He would be a fool not to be afraid. But beneath the fear was something stronger. Determination. Purpose. The burning need to prove that he was more than what they saw when they looked at him. The Korvathi measured worth by the hunt. Very well. He would show them what a human hunter could do. Or he would die trying. Either way, they would never call him prey thing again. The jungle swallowed Danny whole the moment his feet touched the ground. The drop pod lifted away behind him, disappearing into the gray sky, and then he was alone. Truly alone, for the first time since leaving Earth. The air was thick and heavy, filled with moisture and strange smells. Sounds came from every direction. Clicks and hisses and distant roars that echoed through the massive trees. The plants around him were huge, with leaves as wide as doors and vines as thick as his arm. Everything was alive. Everything was watching. Danny took a deep breath and checked his equipment. He had a knife, a small water purifier, and the clothes on his back. Nothing else. The same as every other participant in the trial. He started moving immediately. Standing still was death on a world like this. He needed to find shelter, find water, find food. He needed to stay alive long enough to hunt a warm beast. The first day was the hardest. Danny quickly learned that his human senses were almost useless here. He could not see in the dim light beneath the canopy like the Kovathi could. He could not smell predators approaching from downwind. He could not hear the subtle sounds that warned of danger, but he could think. He watched the local animals, the small creatures that scurried through the underbrush, and the birds that flew between the trees. He noticed which plants they avoided and which ones they ate. He saw how they reacted to certain sounds, how they froze when specific calls echoed through the jungle. He learned that, by the end of the first day, he had found a water source and identified 3 plants that were safe to eat. He had built a simple shelter high in the branches of a tree, hidden from predators that roamed the forest floor. He had survived. On the second day, news came through the emergency beacons that 2 young Kovathi warriors were dead. One had been killed by a pack of razor cats. The other had eaten a poisonous fruit and died screaming in agony. The jungle did not care how strong you were or how sharp your claws were. It killed without mercy. Danny kept moving, kept learning, kept adapting. He figured out how to mask his scent using the juice of a certain plant that the predators seemed to hate. He built traps using vines and sharpened sticks, catching small animals for food. He learned to sleep in short bursts, never staying in one place for more than a few hours. On the third day, he found the first signs of a Voran beast. The tracks were massive, each footprint as wide as his chest. The claw marks on the trees were deep and fresh. The beast had passed through here recently. Danny followed the trail carefully, staying downwind, moving in silence. He was not ready to fight the creature yet. First, he needed to understand it. He needed to learn its patterns, its habits, its weaknesses. He tracked the Voran beast for 2 days, watching from a distance, never getting close enough to be seen. He learned that it hunted at night and slept during the hottest part of the day. He learned that it had a den in a rocky outcrop near a small stream. He learned that it was old, slower than a younger beast would be, with a scar across its left eye that suggested past injuries. Old, experienced, dangerous, but not invincible. On the 5th day, Danny began preparing his trap. He found a narrow ravine that the Voran beast would have to pass through to reach the stream. He spent hours sharpening stakes from fallen branches, hardening the tips in a small fire he built using friction. He dug pits and covered them with leaves and thin branches. He found vines strong enough to hold weight and rigged them across the ravine at ankle height. It was hard work. His hands bled. His muscles ached. But he did not stop. He was almost finished when he heard movement behind him. Catherine stepped out of the undergrowth, his amber eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. He looked tired and dirty, but he was still strong, still dangerous. And he was looking at Danny like a predator looks at wounded prey. "Wow," Catherine said. "The prey thing is still alive." "I am surprised." Danny did not respond. He simply watched, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. "I have been tracking this Voran beast for 3 days," Catherine continued. "I was going to kill it today, But now I see you have found it too. That is a problem." He smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "I wonder what would happen if the beast knew you were here. I wonder if it would come running." Before Danny could react, Keth Arn lunged forward and shoved him hard. Danny stumbled backward, his feet slipping on the muddy ground, and then he was falling, tumbling down the slope toward the Vorn beast's den. He hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs. For a moment he could not move, could not breathe. Then he heard it. A deep, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the very earth. The Vorn beast emerged from its den. It was even bigger than Danny had imagined, a mountain of armored scales and muscle. Its eyes were yellow and filled with hunger. Its fangs dripped with venom. It saw Danny lying on the ground and let out a roar that shook the trees. Then it charged. Danny moved on pure instinct. He rolled to the side as the beast's claws tore through the space where he had been lying. He scrambled to his feet and ran, not away from the beast, but toward the ravine where his trap waited. The Vorn beast followed, its massive body crashing through the undergrowth like a living tank. It was fast, faster than something that big had any right to be. Danny could hear it getting closer, could feel its hot breath on his back. He reached the ravine and jumped, clearing the hidden pits by inches. The Vorn beast followed, and its front legs plunged through the thin covering of leaves and branches. The sharpened stakes below drove deep into its flesh. The creature screamed in pain and rage. It thrashed wildly, trying to free itself, but the movement only drove the stakes deeper. Blood poured from its wounds, steaming in the cool jungle air, but it was not dead. It was hurt and trapped, but it was not dead. Danny circled around, his knife in his hand. The Vorn beast saw him coming and snapped its massive jaws, venom spraying through the air. Danny dodged, waited for the beast to lunge again, and then moved. He had studied the creature for days. He knew its anatomy, knew where the armor was weakest. There was a soft spot beneath the jaw where the scales did not overlap, where the flesh was exposed. He drove his knife into that spot with all his strength. The Vorn beast shuddered once, twice, and then went still. Danny stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, covered in blood and mud. His hands were shaking. His heart was pounding. But he was alive. And the Vorn beast was dead. He looked up at the ridge where Kethoran had pushed him. The Kovathi warrior was still standing there, his face frozen in shock. Danny said nothing. He simply turned back to his kill and began the long, bloody work of removing the skull. The extraction point was a clearing at the top of a tall hill, where the trees gave way to bare rock and the sky opened up above. Danny reached it on the 6th day, a full day before the trial was scheduled to end. He looked terrible. His clothes were torn and stained with blood and mud. His face was cut and bruised. His left arm hung at a strange angle, dislocated during the struggle with the Vorn beast. Every step sent pain shooting through his body, but on his back, strapped with vines and strips of cloth, was the massive skull of the creature he had killed. The Kovathi warriors waiting at the extraction point fell silent as he emerged from the tree line. There were about a dozen of them, young warriors who had completed their own hunts, along with several older soldiers who had come to observe. They all stared at Danny with wide eyes and open mouths. No one spoke. No one moved. Danny walked slowly across the clearing, each step careful and deliberate. The skull was heavy, at least 60 pounds of bone and teeth. His shoulders screamed under the weight. His vision blurred at the edges. But he kept walking. He reached the center of the clearing and stopped. Then, slowly, he lowered the skull to the ground at his feet. "I have completed the trial," he said. His voice was rough from thirst and exhaustion, but it was steady. "I have brought the skull of a Vorn beast." The silence stretched on. The Kovathi warriors looked at the skull, then at Danny. then at each other. Some of them had not brought skulls at all. Some of them had killed smaller prey, easier targets. None of them had taken down a worn beast this size. A sound came from behind the crowd. The warriors parted, and Commander Dralveth walked through, his scarred face unreadable. He approached Danny slowly, his amber eyes fixed on the skull on the ground. He circled it once, examining the teeth, the bone structure, the size. Then he knelt down and looked at the wound beneath the jaw, the single precise stab that had ended the creature's life. "How did you do this?" he asked, looking up at Danny. "How did a soft skin kill a worn beast of this size?" Danny met his gaze without flinching. "I watched it. I learned its patterns. I built a trap. I used its own strength against it." He paused. "Humans are persistence hunters, Commander. We do not have claws or fangs or armor. But we have patience. We have endurance. We adapt and we outlast our prey. This is how my ancestors survived on Earth. This is how I survived here." Dralveth stared at him for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, something that might have been respect. Before he could speak, another figure emerged from the jungle at the edge of the clearing. Cathoran stumbled into view, his gray scales covered in scratches and dirt. He was empty-handed. No skull, no trophy, nothing. He had been gone for 6 days and had nothing to show for it. The other warriors turned to look at him, and Danny saw shame flash across Cathoran's face. He had failed the trial. He had failed to bring back any proof of a kill. In Kavasi culture, this was a deep humiliation. But Danny knew something else. He knew what Cathoran had done in the jungle. He knew about the push, the attempt to use him as bait, the cowardly act that had nearly gotten him killed. He said nothing. He simply watched as Cathoran walked across the clearing with his head down, avoiding the eyes of his fellow warriors. Then another figure stepped forward, and the entire clearing went quiet. Thaxgrol, the Huntmaster, moved through the crowd like a force of nature. The other warriors stepped aside for him without being asked. Even Commander Dralveth straightened slightly in his presence. The Huntmaster walked to the skull on the ground and examined it with the eye of an expert. He touched the bone, traced the wound beneath the jaw, studied the wear on the teeth. Then he looked up at Danny. "I watched the trial feeds from orbit," he said. His voice was deep and calm. "I saw everything." Danny felt his heart skip. The orbital monitoring system. He had forgotten about it. Every moment of the trial was recorded, transmitted back to the ship for the observers to watch, which meant they had all seen what Cathoran had done. Thaxgrol turned to face the younger warrior. Cathoran's face went pale beneath his scales. "You pushed an unarmed participant toward a predator," the Huntmaster said. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the silent clearing like thunder. "You tried to use him as bait so that you could claim an easy kill. When that failed, you ran. You abandoned your hunt. You returned with nothing." Cathoran opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. "This is not cunning," Thaxgrol continued. "This is not strategy. This is cowardice. This is the behavior of prey, not a hunter." He stepped closer to Cathoran, towering over the younger warrior. "You are a disgrace to the trial. You are a disgrace to the ship. You will be stripped of your warrior status and assigned to labor duties until you can prove yourself worthy of another chance." Cathoran's head dropped. His shoulders slumped. He looked like a broken thing, all his pride and arrogance shattered in an instant. The other warriors watched in silence. None of them spoke in his defense. None of them even looked at him. Then Thaxgrol turned back to Danny. The Huntmaster studied the young human for a long moment. Danny stood as straight as he could manage, ignoring the pain in his arm and the exhaustion that threatened to drag him down. He met the Huntmaster's gaze without looking away. You were pushed towards certain death, Thaxcrawl said. You had every reason to die. But you did not die. You used the trap you had prepared. You turned disaster into victory. You killed a Vorn beast that many experienced warriors would struggle to defeat. He paused, and Danny saw something in his amber eyes that he had never seen from a Korvathi before. Not contempt, not amusement, not even surprise, respect. I have been hunting for 40 years, Thaxcrawl said. I have killed more Vorn beasts than any other warrior alive. And I tell you now, what you did in that jungle was the work of a true hunter. He glanced at the skull on the ground, then back at Danny. I was wrong about your kind. We were all wrong. He reached out and placed one massive hand on Danny's shoulder, the injured one. Danny winced at the touch, but he did not pull away. Come, Thaxcrawl said. Let me see to that arm. And then we will talk about what happens next. He turned and began walking toward the waiting shuttle. Danny hesitated for just a moment, looking around the clearing at the faces of the Korvathi warriors. He saw confusion. He saw uncertainty. And in a few faces, he saw the first faint glimmers of something new. Acknowledgement. Danny picked up the Vorn skull, settled it on his back once more, and followed the Huntmaster to the ship. Behind him, Catherine stood alone in the clearing, forgotten by everyone. The medical bay of the ironclad Fang was cold and smelled of chemicals. Danny sat on a metal table while a Korvathi healer worked on his dislocated shoulder. The alien's claws were surprisingly gentle as they manipulated the joint. Back into place. Danny gritted his teeth against the pain. He had refused any numbing agents. He wanted to feel this, to remember it, to carry the memory of what he had survived. When the healer finished and left the room, Danny found himself alone with Thaxcrawl. The Huntmaster stood by the doorway, his massive arms crossed over his chest, watching Danny with those ancient amber eyes. You are stubborn, Thaxcrawl said. It did not sound like a criticism. My grandmother used to say the same thing, Danny replied. He flexed his shoulder carefully, testing the joint. It hurt, but it worked. She also said that stubborn people change the world while sensible people stay at home. Thaxcrawl let out a sound that might have been a laugh. It was short and rough, like a cough. Your grandmother sounds like a warrior. She was a farmer, but she fought in a war when she was young. She survived things that would have broken most people. Danny looked up at the Huntmaster. She taught me that strength is not about the size of your body. It is about what you carry inside. It is about refusing to give up, no matter how hard things get. The Huntmaster was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I have been a warrior for 40 years. I have fought in dozens of battles. I have killed enemies across 100 worlds. And in all that time, I have never seen anything like what I saw on Varkas. He walked closer and sat down on a bench across from Danny. Even sitting, he was almost twice Danny's height. We Korvathi are proud, he said. We believe that our way is the only way. We judge all other species by our standards, and we find them lacking. We have looked at humanity and seen only weakness. Soft skin, dull senses, small bodies. We called you prey things because we thought you were beneath us. He shook his head slowly. We were fools. Danny said nothing. He simply listened. I watched you in that jungle, Thaxcrawl continued. I watched you adapt to an environment that should have killed you in hours. I watched you learn, study, plan. I watched you take on a predator that has killed experienced Korvathi hunters, and I watched you win. Not through brute strength, but through patience, intelligence, and will. He leaned forward, his amber eyes burning with intensity. That is a kind of strength we do not understand. That is a kind of strength we have forgotten. Danny felt something loosen in his chest. For weeks, he had endured mockery and contempt. He had been called weak, soft prey. He had wondered if he would ever be seen as anything else. Now, for the first time, someone was looking at him and seeing what he truly was. Not a joke. Not a victim. A survivor. "There is something I wish to do," Daxgral said. "Something that has not been done for many generations. But first, I must ask you a question. Will you accept a gift from me, Danny Lawson of Earth? Will you accept an honor that no outsider has received in over 800 years?" Danny's heart began to pound. "What kind of honor?" Daxgral stood up and drew a knife from his belt. It was ancient, the blade dark with age, the handle wrapped in worn leather. He held it in his palm and showed it to Danny. "The right of kinship," he said. "The bond of brotherhood. It is the highest honor one Kavathi warrior can give to another. It means that I claim you as family, as blood, as one of my own. It means that any who harm you harm me. It means that your victories are my victories. Your enemies are my enemies." He met Danny's eyes. "It also means that you will forever be bound to our people. You will carry our traditions, our responsibilities, our burdens. It is not a gift given lightly, and it is not a gift that can be taken back." Danny looked at the knife, then at the Huntmaster. His mind raced with the implications. This was not just an honor. It was a statement. It was a declaration to every Kavathi in the galaxy that a human, a soft-skinned prey thing, was worthy of standing among their greatest warriors. "Why?" Danny asked. "Why would you do this for me?" Daxgral smiled, and for the first time, the expression looked warm instead of predatory. "Because you have shown me something I thought impossible. Because you have reminded me that true strength comes in many forms. And because I see in you the spirit of a hunter, a warrior, a brother. I would be proud to call you family." Danny took a deep breath. Then he nodded. "I accept." The ceremony took place in the main hall of the ironclad Fang, with the entire crew assembled to witness. Commander Dralvath stood at the front of the crowd, his scarred face solemn. The warriors who had mocked Danny stood in rows, their expressions a mix of shock and wonder. Kethoran was there too, standing in the back in the plain clothes of a labor worker, stripped of his armor and his honor. Daxgral walked to the center of the hall with Danny at his side. The Vorn skull had been cleaned and polished, and it sat on a pedestal behind them like a monument to what the young human had accomplished. The Huntmaster raised his voice so that everyone could hear. "I, Daxgral, Huntmaster of the Ironclad Fang, claim this warrior as my brother. I bind him to my blood, my honor, my name. From this day forward, he is no longer an outsider. He is no longer prey. He is one of us." He took the ancient knife and drew it across his palm. Dark blood welled up from the wound, dripping onto the metal floor. Then he handed the knife to Danny. Danny took the blade without hesitation. He drew it across his own palm, feeling the sting of the cut, watching his red blood flow. Daxgral reached out and clasped Danny's hand in his own. Their blood mingled, red and black together, dripping between their fingers. "You do not need our claws," Daxgral said. "You do not need our fangs. You have something we have forgotten. The patience to suffer, the will to adapt, the fire that refuses to die." He looked into Danny's eyes. "From this day, you are not prey. You are not guest. You are brother." The hall was absolutely silent. Then, one by one, the Kavathi warriors began to kneel. They dropped to one knee in the ancient gesture of respect, their heads bowed, their amber eyes on the floor. Commander Dralvath knelt. The young warriors knelt. Even Kethoan, in the back of the room, slowly lowered himself to the ground. Danny stood in the center of them all, his hand clasped with the Daxgral's, his blood mixing with alien blood, and felt something he had never expected to feel on this ship. He felt like he belonged. Later, When the ceremony was over and the crew had dispersed, Danny stood alone by a viewport and looked out at the stars. Thak Scroll found him there, 2 cups of some strong Korvati drink in his hands. "You seem thoughtful, brother," the huntmaster said, handing him a cup. Danny took it and sipped. It burned going down, but it was not unpleasant. "I was thinking about what happens next. What this means. Not just for me, but for all of humanity." Thak Scroll nodded. "The story will spread. It is already spreading. Every Korvathi on this ship will tell their families, their friends, their clans. They will tell them about the human who survived Varkath, the soft skin who killed a Vorn beast, the prey thing who became a brother." He looked out at the stars alongside Danny. "Your people will not be underestimated again. That is a gift more valuable than any skull." Danny smiled. "My grandmother would say that was stubborn of me. Your grandmother was wise." Thak Scroll raised his cup. "To stubbornness. To survival. To the fire that refuses to die." Danny raised his own cup. "To brotherhood." They drank together, human and Korvathi, standing side by side in the starlight. And across the galaxy, the story began to spread. The story of Danny Lawson. The story of humanity. The story of a species that did not need claws or fangs or armor to be strong. A species that endured. That adapted. That refused to be broken. A species that, when the time came, could stand among the fiercest warriors in the galaxy and call them brother.